What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jamie. I make tons of content, lifestyle, some college content. I graduated Binghamton University this December, so still answering tons of questions about that. And I just kind of make a ton of different videos on a lot of different things, usually just like weeks in my life and lifestyle content. But today I'm going to be telling you guys all about how I podcast, what I do with my podcast, how I pitch guests, and all of that jazz. So hopefully if you guys are thinking of starting a podcast, this video is helpful for you. Before we start, I am like in my little cave in my room. I thought it was super cute to film in here. I don't know if it is. If you guys hate it, let me know. If you guys love it, let me know, and I'll get back to you guys. Like, I can change the colors, like, ooh. So yeah, I can do lots of different things. So if you let me know what you guys want to see. I don't know. If you guys didn't know, I have a podcast. It is called Touching Base PR Edition. And my goal with Touching Base is to inspire future PR leaders and share stories of renowned PR leaders. That way they can hopefully help some of you guys out, or any of my listeners, with like PR related tasks. Pretty much with every episode, I interview a guest and I share their story of what they do in the PR industry. And I think it's really, really informative, and I love doing it for myself and for my listeners because I think it is information that should be shared with the world. Obviously, the first thing you're probably thinking is, how do you get guests? How do you find guests? Anything like that. So the way I either find my guests is there's a couple different ways. So first of all, the podcast streaming service I use is called Anchor. So Anchor has a Facebook group where you can actually request guests. So I've written there a few times asking like, hey, does anyone work in the communication space? Like, I'm looking to interview guests for my podcast. And then I have some people reach out that way. I also have just like other Facebook groups. Like there's a Gals on the Go YouTube subgroup where some of us talk about our podcast as well. So I can get guests in there. But if I want to pitch a guest, basically what I do is I find guests if I know them, from like PR communications things, or if they make YouTube videos about PR communications, or I follow them on Instagram about PR and communications, or they're a PR firm, and I basically just shoot them a DM and explain like who I am. So I'm like, hello, my name is Jamie, my podcast is Touching Base, like whatever. And I introduce them to my show, and then I ask like, can I email you more information? And then they'll respond like yes or no, and then I send them an email that has a lot more information. So my email has like my goal, my purpose, where you can find the show, and like sample questions and like information for recording. And usually then they text me back, they're like, yes, let's do it. And then we set up a time to record, and we go ahead and do that. When I record most of my interviews on Zoom, and I have my own external microphone that I plug in. It's a really simple one. I got it from Amazon. It looks like this. It's from the brand TKGOU, and it was only about $20. So if you're looking to get into podcasting for cheap, this is probably the way to go. And basically what I tell my guests is, if I know that they have a microphone, like they do their own podcast or something like that, then like we'll set up a podcast and we'll do it that way. But if they don't, I just tell them to wear headphones, because usually headphones have a built-in mic, so it usually just makes it better quality than computer audio. But either way is totally fine, and I record over Zoom. So the great part about Zoom is that you can set it so it downloads as 2 separate MP3 tracks when you record the conversation. That essentially means that you can then edit the volume of one while not editing the other. So if I'm louder than my guest, I'll just raise their volume, which is so great. They do have their own podcast mic that they can't connect to Zoom. So like if they can connect it to Zoom, like that's so great. But if it's an external one, I'll just have them like record it and send me the audio track. But that does put a lot of like pressure on your guests. So if you don't trust them, just stick with Zoom. You really do want to be prepared when you are interviewing these guests, because they'll know if you're not prepared. Definitely if they've done interviews, if you can find their LinkedIn, if you can find their bio, and you really want to make it seem like you know who they are. So for example, in an episode I saw this girl had studied abroad a few times, and then she graduated early. So something I said to her was like, I know you didn't really have a typical college path, so like tell me about your college experience. I know you studied abroad, but like what was that like? So you really do want to like dig deep into like getting to know them. That way the interview just runs a lot smoother, and you kind of just want to make it seem like a conversation, and it's fun. That's the way I do it. I think it's fun, exciting, and eventful. after we podcast, we move into the editing stage of the show, which I use Final Cut Pro to edit. I was using iMovie, but it was kind of being a little bit wonky with like the cutting, and then when I would pull it, it would make it longer. So it's just not like the best or like the most conducive software. But if you guys are comfortable with iMovie, like, go for it. But I use Final Cut Pro because that is also what I use for my videos. Zoom records it on one audio track, and then it records 2 audio tracks. So first I listen to the first audio track and see if there's a big difference in our volume, because if there's not, then I can just totally use that track. It's fine. If there is a difference in the volumes of us, I'll import them both in Final Cut Pro, and I'll play with like the volume setting a bunch of times to see like if I can adjust the volume the best. And then when I'm happy with that, I do just export it as one MP3 file. That way I'm really only editing one file. Then I pull it back into Final Cut Pro, and basically I really do want it to seem like natural and like not forced and cut. So the only things I really like edit and like look for are like long pauses. If we say like or a lot, I'll remove those. But I do try to just make it seem like a normal conversation, like 2 people just like getting coffee, having a chat, and I think that makes it the best experience for a listener. It makes you feel like you're with us. That's what I like to listen to when I'm listening to a podcast as well. Really just think about what you like to listen to when you podcast, and then just replicate that. Intros, outros, things like that. I record my intro on my own every week because I kind of do like a recap of my week. So I record that on my own. I just use QuickTime on the MacBook, and then I pull that in and edit it the same way. Eventually, I do want to have my own like podcast jingle that I'm gonna probably hire someone like Fiverr to make. I think that's what Natalie Barbu said she did. So I'll probably hire someone to make me a jingle eventually. But for now, I'm just using copyright-free music, and I just kind of make it so it starts and then like fades out pretty quickly into the episode. Like you guys can see it, and I'll show you guys what it sounds like.
Hello, and welcome back to Touching Base PR Edition. My name is Jamie, and I'm still your host. Today's episode is an interview with Angie Collins, who is the co-founder of Women in PR.
And then at the end of my episode, I just have like a little bit play again, just so like it sounds put together and it makes it just seem a little bit more professional. But I really just recently started doing music, so if you don't want to do music, you definitely do not have to. Once it is edited in Final Cut Pro, I export it. Usually what I do is I export my intro separately than the actual interview, because I know what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put an ad in between the 2 sections. So how I do ads and all of that is I use the Anchor.fm distribution service. And Anchor is really great because you can make money on your podcast with no minimum listenership. So Anchor is not sponsoring this video. I wish Anchor was sponsoring this video, but they are not. And Anchor is probably the service that most people use. Basically with Anchor, you can upload the individual tracks, then you can add a little bit of music or some sound effects, and you can add your ads. So my podcast is usually structured with the intro, then I add a little bit of music. I think it's called the A Clue sound, and it's literally 2 seconds long, and it's like just fun and flirty. And then I play my ad, then I do the little A Clue sound again, and then I have the main episode. I like the way my podcast sounds, I like the way it is, and all of that, so I'm definitely a fan of that. The next thing that you have to do on Anchor is add your episode title and your show notes. What I've heard is that you want to be as specific as possible in your show notes, that way it comes up like with SEO and things like that. Pretty similar to writing a YouTube description box. I like to do is I write a little bit about what the guest and I talked about, then I include my guest links, and then I include like about Touching Base PR Edition, and then I have like my links. So that is all I kind of do for show notes. It's probably not the best, it's not the worst, so we're vibing with it for now. That is like all the big podcasting aspects of it. So the only other thing that I do with my podcast is Instagram marketing. So that's pretty much just how I get the word out there about my podcast, and I hope guests share my things and things like that. So I'll tell you guys a little bit about like my specific things that I do. So number one, when the episode goes up, I always post a graphic. This has my guest face and my guest name, and I always share this on Instagram and just tell them a little bit of what the episode is about and let them know that it's available wherever it's available and all of that. The other thing I do weekly is a hashtag Tip Tuesday post. So I think that's really cute. Just I pull a quote from the episode, make a little graphic for it. I usually use Canva, and I upload that. And usually what's really great is that they're both centered around my guests. So my guests will usually share the episode graphic and the Tip Tuesday, which just makes it so much easier to get the word out for your podcast. Kind of like what you want to do is have people with followers that will want to listen to your podcast. So people that work in the PR space are great because usually their followers also work in the PR space. I also just post the episode graphic, the Tip Tuesday, and then I do 2 more posts every week that range from reposts to like national holidays to just kind of maybe how I'm feeling or pictures or whatever. I just kind of try to pull that in. And then I just use stories to gauge interest on guests, see who they want to hear from, see if they have any questions for guests, anything like that. That is how I do the Instagram for my podcast. I guess like my biggest tip for if you want to start a podcast is just go for it. I decided I wanted to start a podcast on a Friday. I posted on Instagram, hey, guess what? I'm starting a podcast. Made an episode graphic. Ordered a microphone on Amazon that night. Literally waited for my microphone to come in. It came with Amazon Prime, so it was there on Saturday. And then I recorded my episode and got it up on Sunday. So like literally just do it, go for it, and you'll learn as you go. I think that the biggest tip and like the biggest thing that's stopping you is just that you're scared or you don't know what you're doing. Like just pick up the microphone and go for it. You can do it if I can do it. We are all in this together, and I think the podcast community is a really supportive community, especially like the Anchor Facebook group and just different things like that. Like podcasting is fun. It's very, very different than YouTube, I think. Whatever it may be, find your niche, stick with it, get a guest, get a co-host, market, and you will be successful. My podcast usually garners 20 to 30 listens an episode, which is not a lot, but it is a lot, and it makes me happy to see that number because I know that it's 20 people that it helped. Even if it didn't help 100 people or 1,000 people, it is 20 people that my podcast helped and 20 people that listen to me talk to someone else. So it just makes me feel good. It makes me feel happy. Podcasting, especially my show where I talk to other people and hear their stories, it inspires me. And I love, love, love podcasting. And I love my podcast, Touching Base PR Editions. That is kind of everything I think you need to know about starting a podcast in 2021. Like, it's not hard. Get to it. Get on it. I am so excited to listen to all of your podcasts. If you guys have podcasts, like let me know down below. If you learned anything from here, like let me know. If you like this lighting, let me know. If you like this setup, let me know. And I will talk to you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.